I mean, I'd be like 2 months out of college and I'd be getting calls from the electrical engineers and the supply chain managers at customers, like screaming their heads off at me, like, where the hell is our equipment? We need this. We can't energize the substation without it. What are you doing? Who is your manager? Expedite this. This is critical. And I'm like, I'm trying to go to happy hour, man.
Hello and welcome to the Dumb It Down podcast. I'm your host, Eric Larson, and we're here to break down the disconnect between school and work. In this podcast, I interview my network to reflect on the choices they made in high school and college and how their interests led them to their current roles. Today, I'm joined by Chris Morrow, a buddy of mine from high school who also went to college with me. Chris applied to 9 different colleges, got accepted to state on a scholarship, ended up being a mechanical engineer, and is now the co-founder of his own business. At the same time, Chris is looking for jobs, so may be in the same situation as a lot of our listeners. Chris has a great sense of humor and a couple good stories, so thanks for listening. I also have included one poll as I changed the format a little bit. This is one longer episode, so curious your thoughts on that. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to the Dumb It Down podcast. I'm your host, Eric Larson, and we are here to break down the disconnect between school and work. Today, I am joined by another longtime friend of mine, Chris Morrow. He's out in Denver, Colorado, and we're going to talk a little bit about his journey from high school Chris to mechanical engineering student to doing all kinds of stuff in Denver. Chris, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you, Eric. I am well. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm sitting here. It's 5:30. It's dark. I'm staring out my window, and winter is finally here. It's like 40 degrees outside.
Hey, send some of that this way. We need some snow. It's the longest into the winter time that Denver has not experienced snow.
Oh, no fresh POW.
No fresh POW, and it was about 72 degrees a couple days ago in December.
Yeah.
So we need some snow for the season.
There you go. Yeah, Chris. Actually, I taught Chris how to ski way back in the day.
That's true. Back in Wisp. Primetime skiing at the intersection of West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. Best skiing in the world.
Yeah, puts Denver to shame. Nice. Well, we could tell lots and lots of stories about how we know each other, but I wanted to ask one in particular from back in the day, just to set the stage. And I know you've got something up your sleeve. So, what's a good high school story for the listeners?
Oh, there's so many, but Eric, I don't know exactly when we met, but we had a physics class together in high school. I think it was 10th grade. So we were little sophomores with Miss Brown, arguably the best teacher that I have ever had. You would probably say the same in most people that had her as a teacher. But one of the projects for that class, we'll start with the pasta bridge. You remember we had to build a bridge exclusively out of pasta, whatever pasta you wanted. Could have been fettuccine or rigatoni, or you know more pastas than I do with your
true.
Italian heritage. And it was a competition in our class to see which bridge could, I think we suspended a weight in the middle and held it over 2 tables, and which bridge would hold the most weight before it cracked. So that was fun. I remember building that at one of our houses.
I remember procrastinating and building it at your house, and I don't think the glue had completely dried, and we went to present the project, and I don't think we did too well.
I agree with that. So lesson learned, if we do build bridges, wait a couple days for the glue to dry.
Genius. Yeah, who could have thought that before we put it all together? Nice. Well, that's a good one. Chris and I also managed to put together a physics music video that does not need to be looked up or Googled or shared. But it was a good time.
It was a great time. Eric wrote the lyrics. If any high school kids out there, if you're listening, if you're struggling to understand Isaac Newton's three laws of motion, go study your textbook because you don't want to watch our video.
Yes, I was so worried you were going to say the name, and it's anyway. It's better left in the YouTube abyss than it is brought to light again. But the lyrics are top notch. The video content could use some work. Chris's and I's rapping is on point for sure too. But anyway, yeah, we'll blow past that now. But that does bring us to our first little segment. But we were sophomores in high school, and then quite quickly after, we were seniors in high school, and looking at schools and majors and thinking through a lot of things, and maybe even thinking through some options in addition to just college, which doesn't really make sense. Anyway, Chris, as a high school senior, what was going through your head when you were looking at schools and degrees?
Sure. So, I mean, growing up in Charlotte, where I grew up, kind of the expectation um, for kind of where we were in school was take that next step, go to college at bare minimum, go for a BS or BA degree. So, I always loved math and science. Loved our physics classes, chemistry classes. A lot of that was due to great teachers,
Mm-hmm.
which I guess is a tell to the influence that good teachers can have on your future. Um, but enjoyed that. Loved science and camps and everything as a kid. So kind of all of that took me in the direction of some kind of engineering or something technical. So I researched a lot of schools, a lot in North Carolina, a lot all over. I mean, I think I applied to 9 or 10
Wow.
colleges, which was too many colleges. I think if I were to go back, I would narrow things down before I kind of pulled the trigger on sending out applications and
Mm-hmm.
taking that next step. Um, but that's it kind of led to applications to technical schools. I mean, I looked at NC State, I looked at Georgia Tech, Clemson, a lot of the kind of regional, top engineering schools in the Southeast. And I actually also applied to Princeton. I don't know if I ever told you that.
Ah,
Um,
nice.
yeah, I applied to Princeton and got immediately rejected, which kind of makes me laugh because later in my life I lived in Princeton for,
Yeah,
for 3 years.
the Tigers.
So the ironic, no Tigers, but
Yeah.
yeah. So kind of all that said and done, NC State, the Wolfpack, go Pack, uh, ended up being kind of the best option for me at the time.
So
It
yeah.
being in North Carolina, in state. I had a good scholarship opportunity to NC State, and there were I don't know 10 or 12 engineering majors to choose from. So a lot of opportunity.
Yes, agreed. Lots of decisions at that time. So NC State made sense. A little bit before that, from the notes here, you said you had an airport civil engineering internship. Is that in high school?
That is in high school.
Okay, so what led you to like even have that on your radar as a high school student?
I don't even remember how that came about to be, but I guess there was a career center at Myers Park High School, Go Stangs, and that center kind of partnered with different organizations around Charlotte, and somehow I think my guidance counselor connected me with one opportunity that was with the Charlotte Douglas International Airport,
CLT.
and yeah, CLT, and it was I wouldn't even call it an internship now, but it was 4 or 5 days where I was at the airport and kind of shadowing a civil engineer that worked there.
Hmm.
So this was back in the late 2000s, and Charlotte was, growing, not quite the level that it is as is now, as you know.
Yeah, it's like top five airports right now.
Yeah, but they were building a new parking deck. They were building some new runways. So it was kind of fun driving around on the tarmac and seeing kind of how that process worked with with all the rebar and materials, and definitely different than sitting in a high school classroom.
Yeah, that sounds kind of similar. I don't remember exactly how I got introduced to it, but my parents forced me to do some form of engineering internship when I was a high school senior, I think, too. So, yeah, it's good your guidance counselor was that resource too, because yeah, it's you can't know what engineering is going into college, much less as a high school student. So glad you got connected. But it sounds like from the types of schools you applied to, you already had engineering in mind. You were applying to some of the more technical schools, Georgia Tech, NC State, Virginia Tech. And at that time, had you already honed in on mechanical or no?
Good question. I'd say no. Mechanical was always on my radar, primarily and because everything I heard about mechanical was it's the most versatile. There's so many options for career trajectories or for graduate school or for whatever path you would want to take. I considered chemical engineering for a hot minute and just kind of didn't really end up going down that path.
Dismissed it. Yeah, I mean, we had a really
Yeah,
good chemistry teacher too. That was probably some of the reasoning.
yeah. There was that. I mean, biomedical. I always was always on my radar. Industrial was always on my radar, which we can definitely talk to later. But surprisingly, civil engineering was never on my radar,
That's
and a
funny.
lot of that is due to that internship. And I actually wanted to tell you a funny story about that. It was, I think I said it was 5 days. So really, it was 4 days and then one night shift to get experience with what the a civil engineer might have to stay until 4 a.m. to let the concrete dry, or you got to pour concrete at before the sun rises.
Hmm.
Uh, so the shift was, I think, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., like a classic third shift. Um, and I'm like 16 or 17 years old at the time. So we get there, about 2 hours go by, 1 a.m., I just fell asleep in the truck. And the guy I was shadowing just let me sleep the entire night, woke me up at
Oh,
7 a.m.
what a guy.
When the shift was over, and was like, all right, go home.
Well, I'm sure you really learned a lot.
Yes, so I guess it wasn't interesting enough.
So that's what turned you off from civil. You're like, all right, not doing that again. All right, so you're a freshman now. You applied to engineering. You got into NC State and a couple other schools. You got the Park Scholarship to go to NC State, which was nice, which probably made your decision a lot easier, right?
Yes.
Yeah, in a
Yeah.
nutshell, why not?
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Definitely.
Cool. So actually, just a little bit on that. So you were welcomed to campus like a day before people and met some friends right off the bat. Just a little bit on how the Park Scholarship, what the positives and negatives of it over the course of the 4 years.
Yeah. I mean, I stand firm in that the Park Scholarship's probably the greatest thing that ever happened for me and to me.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you said, we got to campus a little bit early and did a little freshman retreat so that the Park Scholar class we could all meet each other and um, kind of spend some time off campus before everyone got back on and the excitement of starting college freshman year begun.
It's like rushing a
Um,
frat.
it is. It's just like it, except for you know, yeah, little more acceptable. PG. I don't I
Minimal
don't know
hazing.
I don't know what the words. Yeah, minimal hazing. We had to chug our milk instead. But yeah, over the 4 years, I mean, there was a lot that the scholarship kind of demanded and entailed. Some of that was trips to DC to learn about current events. We actually had a weekly class pretty much throughout all 4 years where we got together and kind of talked about upcoming events or current events. Um, there were some built-in trips I talked about that freshman retreat. There was also a senior retreat. First time in my adult life that I came out to Denver.
Oh,
It was at Rocky Mountain National Park. So we
cool.
came out, did some hiking. That was, I don't know, a week or two before senior year. But I mean, at the end of the day, it was just a great network, really great community. Uh, I stay in touch with the program. I help do interviews every year now, which is going on right now. So that's kind of fun to see what high school kids are up to these days.
Yeah, I didn't
Kind
know
of
that.
it's kind of fun to stay connected with what the activities are, and it's crazy the caliber of student these days. I read these applications and I have no clue how I got chosen compared to some of these uh, some of these kids. And one more point on that. I mean, it's Tuesday, December 7th, 2021, and we're what 2 years into the COVID pandemic, right? And a lot of these applications for high school kids are talk about the challenges that they've faced
Hmm.
trying to stay, excellent caliber students through COVID,
Hmm.
and it's pretty fascinating. Like it hasn't really affected me in that sense because of remote work. Maybe you're the same, but
Yeah.
juniors and seniors in high school and their whole world is wrapped around going to school and being active with their community every day. Pretty heavy.
Yeah, that's definitely not something we had to deal with. I feel like in general, I mean, I've been super lucky to be in the time and place of my life where, yeah, I was literally working remote before and then COVID hit. I was like, okay, keep working remote. Not that there aren't challenges, but I can't imagine a high school student writing about anything but that because, right, like you said, complete shift in their day-to-day activities and priorities and stuff. But yeah, that's cool that you're still involved. I know on Julie's podcast, she gives some updates to architects who are in high school or are thinking about it. And the only time I get called for advice is when they're trying to get money out of me at NC State. So not quite as fun. But yeah, no, I benefited from Chris's Park Scholarship connections as well, whether it was party invites or teacher recommendations, stuff like that. So I think that it goes without saying anyone with an opportunity like that would be unwise not to take it. Moving on, or I guess backing up maybe a little, but when you were a freshman, you had to decide on mechanical. A little bit about why you made that choice and if you would stick to that choice now, looking back.
Yeah, great question. NC State offered, I don't know, 10 or 12 engineering majors. And I think one of the options was to do like an undecided engineering where you got exposure to a lot of different of the disciplines.
I don't know that.
Um, yeah, I just recently found that out because one of the Park Scholar applicants said that's what they wanted to do. And
Nice.
I said, oh, wow, that would have been great. Um, but I pretty much initially, dove into mechanical um, right off the bat, just based on what I knew and talking with some upperclassmen and what all the internship and job opportunities were. It seemed like a decision that wasn't really a decision at the time, if that makes sense.
Yep, I agree.
Where going into mechanical engineering would let you would give you the most access to opportunities down the road. But your freshman year in college, and I stand by this, you're not so focused on you know planning out your entire life, or I wasn't.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure different people would have different opinions on that. I think most freshmen, generally speaking, are adapting to the social aspects of college rather than it's impossible to know what you're going to end up doing. And the people that come in with something that focused probably wouldn't listen to this podcast because I think the majority don't really have that, I want to be a NASA engineer or something like that. So, yeah, I agree. I think as we went through school, the amount of people we knew in engineering school, we got kind of the gist of what other people were doing, what an aerospace would do, what a biomedical, what a chemical would do. But when you're a freshman and you don't know that, you're trying to put off that decision. So, Chris and I said, well, mechanical, you still kind of get to do everything and don't have to put yourself in a corner. So, yeah, why not? So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I did as well. So,
So your second question, uh, knowing what I know now, I would have pursued industrial engineering instead of mechanical engineering. And that is primarily just due to it being higher level, more systems approach, uh, a little bit more applicable to like business as a whole. I mean, we half of our mutual friends were in industrial engineering, so like I'd say we had a front row seat to what industrial engineers what they were going through, and I feel bad. I mean, at the time, out of all the engineering disciplines at NC State, industrial engineering was probably the least technical. So a lot of people would call it imaginary engineering. I would never, you would never,
ever.
never ever. But yeah, I mean, having gone through the program and joined the workforce, I mean, that's some of the most applicable information you can have. You know, how to improve a process, how to optimize, how to think about a systems approach to things, um, which is almost in a way like opposite of mechanical, where mechanical is very focused. At least when we went through, I'd say it was really focused on like optimizing like a tiny part of the system instead of a whole like system from start to end.
Big picture.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. That's really well said. So, moving forward, you're a senior in college looking for jobs as a mechanical engineer. What was on your mind as you were looking for jobs? What were your preferences? What'd you think?
Yeah, so I had done a little study abroad in school. I had done an internship here or there, some international trips. So when I was looking at jobs, uh, kind of a combination of those things I wanted to kind of bring with me into my first job. So I was hoping, like my number one goal was a rotational program with a company. So that would be, there was a bunch of different rotational programs out there, um, but usually the way they're structured is you spend a certain amount of time, 6 months to a year in one specific area, um, like subject matter, and then do a similar amount of time in another, and then another. It's usually like a 2 to 4 year program.
Mhm.
So I was looking for opportunities like that. Again, kind of to provide like a high level overview of whatever industry um, I was going to be going into. Um, so I hit up the NC State Career Fair pretty hard, as we all did. Um, Booked, had a bunch of interviews. I mean,
What kind of jobs were you looking for? Was it exclusively the rotational program? Did you have a couple offers you were juggling? What was that like?
yeah, it was. There were a couple offers. I mean, it was a many interviews over the course of a couple months. Um, what it really boiled down to was three main offers. One was with Eastman Chemical, where I would have been a process engineer at the plant, basically like mechanical engineer one in, I think it was Johnson City area,
Mhm.
Tennessee. Um,
Very rural town.
Very rural town. Was not a rotational program. Uh, it actually had the highest salary offer, so there were like pros and cons to that. But really, the main two that I was considering between was an offer from ABB, which was their rotational program, which was called the PAL program at the time, Power and Automation Leaders. Um, an offer for that, and then also an offer for Lord Corporation, which is a company that uh, I had interned with the summer before. Um,
More on that
it,
later.
yeah, it was an offer for their a full time role in Cary. Uh, what I really had wanted at the time was that Lord rotational program, but there were some issues with the interviewing process on my end. Um,
Yeah, we'll
that
save
that I
that.
think we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, stay tuned to find out Chris's biggest screw up. Anyway, so yeah, you had a couple offers, rotational programs, just to throw my 2 cents in. So a lot of companies now are doing the rotational programs because one, it gives them kind of an introduction into where you would fit best. So they're not just plugging you into one location and losing you a year later to a competitor when you find out you want to do something else better. It's kind of a trial period for both sides, and I think for Chris and myself and anyone who's looking at them, it's a really nice way to not back yourself into a corner again and kind of keep your decision making open, where you can say, okay, maybe I do like being mechanical engineer one, maybe I would prefer working in project management, maybe I stomached living in a very rural area of town to be in a manufacturing plant for 8 months and never want to do it again. So I think it's a win-win, and they're in very high demand for that reason. So Chris was an excellent student and naturally got one. So what were the 3 shifts that you ended up doing, or the structure in general?
Yeah, my first rotation on the PAL program was is actually ABB's largest factory in maybe North America, definitely the United States. But I moved from Raleigh. I had lived in North Carolina my entire life, and I drove from Charlotte to Columbia, Missouri, and then did my first 8 month assignment in Jefferson City, Missouri, uh, which is little known fact is the capital of Missouri. It's not St. Louis or Kansas City.
It's
Uh,
not a fun fact, just little known.
not a fun fact. Um, yeah, no offense to anybody from Missouri or from Jefferson City, Missouri. But I spent 8 months there um, working as a sales engineer, which actually opened my eyes to more of the technical sales, avenues that you could take.
Was that
Um,
something you had like checked a box and wanted to do when you applied, or they plugged you in there without your consideration?
I wanted to do technical sales. I wanted sales experience, kind of business development, customer facing roles. So I definitely made that pretty clear in the interview process.
How'd you know to want to do that?
Um, I mean, I've always loved talking with people and kind of the interpersonal interaction. Part of it, my internship in college with Lord was very much more on the R&D side, um, far removed from the customer. And I have this philosophy today that the closer you are to the customer in a business, like the more impactful you feel that your work is, because you can truly see what your company is bringing to the table and what problems you're solving. So I didn't feel that at Lord because I was very much kind of like, the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. Like, don't come out. We don't want to see
Mixing
you.
potions.
Yeah, I mean, very heavy on the R&D side,
Okay.
um, which was interesting, but I didn't really see how what I was doing was like connecting to solving a problem for a customer.
Yeah. So did sales come up as like part of your business minor? Was it other people at Lord? Like how did sales come on your radar? Technical sales.
Man, kind of like a death by a thousand cuts thing. I can't think of like a specific moment. Um, and it was kind of like sprinkled in all through college. I mean, I took an entrepreneurship class my freshman year uh, with Aaron Dakey, actually.
Hey,
Shout
great
out
guy.
Dakey's. But that, and then I took another business class and then realized, oh, 4 or 5 credits away from having a business minor. I have the time. Let's rock and roll. So I took more business classes, and yeah, I'd say it kind of just, you know, comparing the business classes and the engineering classes, I could clearly see that the business classes were kind of a little bit more applicable, a little bit more like high level, um, helpful for driving a business successfully. And then the engineering was more technical, more execution style.
Hmm.
So it was kind of a good balance having both. But yeah, really combination of a very technical internship, actually a couple of very technical internships, um, business classes, kind of networking, talking with people on the PAL program. I mean, we had the opportunity to talk with current PALs, as they were called, while we were in the interview process.
Cute.
So I really had an idea of what all the options were going into the program, and knowing that helped me kind of steer that first rotation, kind of more towards technical sales. Um,
Cool.
yeah. And my boss at the time, her or she put me and another guy. We were starting in Jefferson City at the same time, and I think she recognized like we had technical experience already, and we could handle a challenge. And so I think she threw us in probably the most challenging ABB environment in the country, which was a great place to start out.
So that was the sales role in Jeff City. What was it challenging?
I mean, I'd be like 2 months out of college, and I'd be getting calls from the electrical engineers and the supply chain managers at customers, like screaming their heads off at me, like, where the hell is our equipment? We need this. We can't energize the substation without it. What are you doing? Who is your manager? Expedite this. This is critical. And I'm like,
Oh boy.
I'm trying to go to happy hour, man. So it was definitely an interesting introduction to the working world.
Yeah, just talk briefly about where you were and what you did in those other rotations, and then we'll move on.
So, yeah, so my second rotation, I moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and totally different side of the business, but worked in the low voltage drives group. So drives that power, fans and compressors, and basically make large manufacturing operations run.
Okay.
And I was more on the kind of the factory side, kind of operational excellence, actually like straight up industrial engineering work.
Oh, all right.
Um, yeah, so that was for 8 months. Kind of worked on optimizing the flow at the factory and trying to reduce costs and improve quality and all that good stuff. And then after that, I moved to Princeton, New Jersey, and took a kind of another sales engineer role,
Hmm.
but it was a little bit more broad, kind of more a little bit more business development than sales itself. Much less on the engineering heavy side and more on kind of the contracting, sales, responding to sales inquiries, things like that.
So the sales engineer role was more about fixing the customer's engineering problems, and the business development role was more about approaching new sales and new deals and responding in a fashion that would help paint ABB in the best light. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, so I guess in summary, rotational program, they probably offered a lot of different types of jobs. You figured out that sales engineering was kind of cool. You continued down that path for your last shift, and you had exposure to like 3 different parts of the country, 3 different parts of the business, and even snuck a couple international months in. So then after that, I believe you stayed in that role, in that last business development role in Princeton for a couple of years. And then they even allowed you to stay with ABB and you took a role in California.
Yeah. Yes. So I liked what I was doing. I liked that I was working with a technical product, kind of in a technical industry. Like there was a lot of mechanical and electrical engineering concepts that were still, that I was still kind of using on a day-to-day basis.
You enjoyed that while you still wanted to work with people. You wanted both.
Exactly, exactly. Like that was kind of the background, but primarily it was more solving customers' problems, responding to projects and deals, and kind of making making all that happen in the real world, but also kind of responding to some of the technical challenges. And so that's when, when I moved to California, a similar role, just took on kind of a bigger territory, more customers, um, a little bit more targeted for the accounts. Um, but it was fun because it was based in manufacturing. I mean, I was representing products where they were being manufactured in or just outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I could go to the factory, put my hands on the products, learn a lot about it technically, but then fly back to California and then go meet with customers, um, understand how they were applying the equipment and the technology. So it's kind of a cool balance.
Right. You kind of get the balance of using your technical expertise, having to learn something intricate, and then being able or having to explain that in a simple way to customers.
Having the mechanical engineering background, I've found has lent me a lot of credibility, whether or not I use my mechanical engineering background daily. Um, just having a degree in engineering, a lot of people respect that.
Yeah, I completely
So
agree. I'll echo that. But what I don't necessarily agree with it. I don't know if you do or not. Like it's good, it benefits both of us, but do you think that it should be that way or there should be a different way?
I I'm torn. I'm really torn because I agree with you in a sense. Like just because there's words on a paper, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. But on the flip side, it does. What I really think is engineering teaches you how to think critically and how to solve problems, almost regardless of what engineering discipline you go into. I mean, you don't it doesn't have to be engineering. I mean, it's the whole point of school and college, right? It's like learn how to think. Yeah, education, like learn how to think, learn how you learn. But I think engineering for me like was unique because it really helped me like think critically and kind of break problems down. I mean, like to the extremes of you have like a thermodynamics equation, like or a thermodynamics problem. Like there's three equations, plug the numbers in, take three sheets of paper, work it all the way through. There's an answer on the bottom, right? Like, yeah, you have to think, you have to know the equations, you have to know how to apply things. Um, but that's the one extreme. And then, I mean, I took like a design optimization course my senior year, I think, and it was awesome. It was more of here's this very very open ended problem. Uh, I just read one of them the other day. It was like here's a rectangle, and you have to cut four circles of different diameters into this rectangle. What's the best way to do that so that you minimize the scrap
Hmm.
of this rectangle? And I was like, huh, that's very applicable. Like waste reduction, you know, time efficiency, cost efficiency, right? Like if you can save 10% on every single one of those rectangles, over time, you could save a company millions of dollars. So that was kind of an example on the other end of, it really forces you to think about, how can I set this up? How can I set this problem up so that we can get as close to, the answer as possible.
Yeah, that's two really good examples. I'm glad you went down that rabbit hole because I think that there is a lot of value in an engineering degree and learning how to think critically and learning how to problem solve. However, I think in a lot of the intro classes that maybe aren't quite as innovative, you have a lot of those teachers who are teaching out of the book and there's a problem and you get to the one solution, which is not how life works. There are many solutions and the problem changes as you're working it out. So to have a little bit more of a practical application, um, Julie mentioned having professors that like are out in the field, like aren't just research oriented, education only professors is very helpful. And I think that our former school could do a better job of that, and probably others as well. And it probably depends on your degree. But generally speaking, yeah, totally agree with you. So thanks for that. Well, moving on a little. So yeah, ABB allowed Chris to move to California, allowed Chris to move to Denver eventually, maybe. Chris moved to Denver eventually
There you go.
and is now in a current positionless. What are you doing these days, Chris?
That's the question right there. Well, trying to do my snow dance so we can go skiing,
Ah,
but
right.
no. Yes, moved to Denver and had an opportunity to, always had the entrepreneurial bug, as many do. But had an opportunity to really jump full time into a business that, I helped start with my fiance.
Oh,
Very different industry, more on the kind of consumer goods, um, cosmetics industry.
so yeah, a
You know,
little just background, like square one. So Chris's fiance Vanessa is a chemical engineer, worked for a company basically as their chemical engineer with a bunch of business people who didn't understand the expertise required, and then
sure.
said, I can do the business part myself. And the biggest customer agreed. So now pulled Chris into it. And you and Vanessa are working as a power couple. And now I'll toss it back to you.
Yes, yes, that's a good kind of 60-second summary. Um, so yes, and now we found a facility nearby, um, and we've invested in equipment, and we've scaled to a point where, um, yeah, we're ready to take on more business with this customer and other customers.
What are you making?
Ooh, we're making a lot of things. Um, our biggest customers in the tattoo space. So we make a ton of tattoo ointments. There's a couple other creams that she's made. Um, she's working on a lotion right now. She's working on a few other things. Um, but yeah, so we've had a lot of, tattoo products going through the manufacturing line. And this is all like equipment that we spec'd out and bought.
Yeah, so it's the coolest thing. So Chris and his fiance Vanessa literally have rented out industrial warehouse space, bought all of this equipment to manufacture and place lotion in small vials on this small assembly line to pack it and ship it out to customers to improve their tattoos, I guess. And Chris is using all of his manufacturing experience, which honestly I forgot about until we were talking right now, to like put together this efficient assembly line and try to scale this product. So yeah, I'm excited for y'all.
Oh, thank you. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, technically, at the end of the day, we're a contract manufacturer, is really what the business is. So we are not a brand, but we have brands that come to us that either need formulation help or assistance.
The bottom line is, Vanessa has improved these formulations over a number of years so that she has something, a material, I guess, for lack of a better word, that is in high demand and that most people don't know how to make. And you guys are leveraging that into a full scale business. So,
Yeah, it's challenging. I mean, there's pros and cons to the self-employment business ownership for
mhm.
sure. Uh, can be a lot of freedom, but also, can be zero predictability, which is kind of the opposite, or not completely opposite, but then kind of like a typical career trajectory.
Yeah, Chris has always been entrepreneurial. I don't know why or how, just because he was a smart guy and got the itch. But there were lots of entrepreneurship classes at State. You could kind of go down a entrepreneur track instead of senior design, which Chris did. So it's all kind of working out. However, at the same time, you're looking for some other gigs too. So yeah, still figuring it out.
Yes, yeah, I'd say at some point all the dots are going to connect. But yeah, I'm interested in clean energy and potentially getting back into the power industry. So I'm actually am currently looking at new roles, and that's probably relevant for high school or college listeners who are kind of thinking about what to do, because I'm even you know 7-8 years into a career and going through informational interviews and reaching out and tapping into my network and um, going after opportunities. So I think probably the process never really stops. Uh, Probably always want to cultivate that or be ready for the next opportunity, because you never know where it'll come from. I never thought I'd be making tattoo products.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because people, I feel like when you're in high school or college, parents or mentors or whoever are saying, oh, you should just call up your network and find out what they're doing and see if you like it. And it's really hard to even know what questions to ask at that point. Um, but in the same vein, you could be 7 or 8 years into your career and still trying to identify what you're interested in and how much you'd like to apply that to a job. So, like what Chris said, informational interview, just calling up people that he's met over the years, I guess, and asking them why they like what they do. I guess what's a little bit about your process there?
Yeah, this is a relatively new process, by the way, Eric, like within the past couple of months. But like a good example, I reached out to a connection on LinkedIn, a guy that went to NC State actually, and he works as a project developer for solar projects. And I kind of heard about it, done a little bit of reading on it, but I reached out to him and basically asked, "Hey, can I, here's like three of the main questions, right? Like, what what's the day to day look like? Um, what's your perfect customer or your perfect project? Um, you know, where has the industry been? And then like where do you think it's going based off the work that you've done?" Questions like that, and kind of throw that at him and say, "Hey, if you have a few minutes to chat, I'd love to just pick your brain." I hate that expression, but pick your brain and get your ideas on this role and this career that you've kind of built for yourself. And I've really been surprised at how receptive people are. I mean, people are very open to, yeah, sure. I mean, I'll tell you about what I do, because it's kind of a no pressure situation. Um, so yeah, so I learned a lot about what a project developer for solar projects does, and there's a lot to it. There's a lot of travel, like the in terms of the travel requirements, education requirements, um, how long projects take, right? I mean, you've been in sales roles where sometimes the cycle is, 3 months, maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's 10 years. I mean, he'd been working on a wind farm project since he started 6 years ago. So my personality, no thanks. That's too long for me. But so yeah, they kind of learn a lot about what people are doing.
So yeah, that's cool. I think that's helpful. I think it's tough to ask those kinds of questions like as a college student. Like I remember my dad saying like, "Oh, call this person and quote unquote pick their brain." And it's like, what do you do? What do you do day to day? Can be answered so many different ways. And I guess hopefully now you have some idea of what you would want to hear, or hopefully someone is straightforward enough to say, well, I spend 4 hours of my time on meetings and 2 hours of my time on data entry, but it's generally not how it goes. So it's a tough question, and it can only help to hear answers. So I still recommend doing it, but it doesn't make it easy.
Yeah, it's kind of a chicken and the egg problem in a way because, like you said, when you're a college senior, I mean, whether or not you've had like work experience while you're in school, um, you don't really know you don't know what you don't know. So you can ask those questions, but you have no context for it.
Mm-hmm.
But then once you work for a little bit, um, then you have some experience of okay, I spent a year doing this. I had to go to the office every day. I spent 80% of my workday on a computer or what have you.
Right.
Then you can compare what you hear from if you do reach out to people in your network or like your dad said, just call this guy up. You can you have a reference point to compare that to.
Lots of options out there. Can be overwhelming. However, people like Chris has made it work through a winding journey. Cool. Well, anything else? I got a couple questions for you, but anything else before we tackle those you'd like to get off your chest?
I don't think so. I think I probably got on my soapbox enough.
Perfect. All right. So a couple questions for you. Oh, this is a fun one always. What's been your biggest screw up?
Oh man. Well, earlier I think I alluded to coming out of college. I was kind of between two job offers. One was with ABB, which is the one I ultimately accepted. The other was with Lord, which was a full-time role in Cary, kind of based off the internship that I had done. But what I had really wanted, top of the list, was Lord had a rotational program. It's called the CFP, Career Foundations Program at the time. I don't know what it's called now, but it was kind of an overview for all of, um, or a lot of Lord's different products. I mean, Lord's a really cool company. They do like active vibration. What is it called? Active vibration control for military helicopters. Anyway, really cool company. I was pretty, uh, I was pretty psyched about the opportunity. Um, I'd worked there as an intern, so I kind of had like a name built for myself. So in a way, it was my opportunity to lose, and so interview came around. The kind of personality, assessment went really well, and then there was this technical portion of the interview, and they asked some questions about like material science, some things that I wasn't like super confident with, um, or like super interested in. But really, ultimately, what happened was, they asked me two or three questions. It was all like relatively technical, fundamental, basic concepts of material science, and I absolutely bombed. Absolutely bombed. Like couldn't answer the question. I don't know if it was like froze or didn't know, but like it was so bad to the point where we finished the interview and they're like, how about we do another interview next week and we try this again?
Oof.
Yeah, and it was kind of like, you know, internally I was like, oh shit, like what? How did that just happen? Like I was a great student. I did well on tests. I got good grades, but then when it came to like really like translating that, like what I was learning in school to like explaining the fundamentals to like a professional, like huge gap.
Nothing.
Nothing. So we did a second interview. Kind of the same thing happened, um, which is hilarious thinking back on it because poor Mike, my boss, probably stuck his neck out to get me a second interview, and then after that, they were probably like, "Dude, Mike, what? Who is this kid?" So it's funny thinking back on it, but yeah. Needless to say, that didn't work out. Um, but had some other good opportunities, so took that.
Yeah, well, it says something about how much you're learning versus how well you're doing on tests. But all in all, funny story. When you look back on it, not funny in the moment. But yes, Chris did not quite get the job he was looking for there, unfortunately.
Well, and I'm still alive and smiling to this day. So
Alive and well.
yeah, things go on.
So I want to change this question up because you alluded to it earlier and I thought it was good. What's your perfect project?
Ooh, hard hitting. That's a great question. Somewhere in kind of the clean energy space, whether it was like energy storage or solar, either on the generation side, or kind of how customers drive the clean energy changes that are going on in the industry. That space, but still incorporating kind of the entrepreneurial bug. Um,
So maybe working for a startup that has a new technology that takes, I don't know, smart metering closer to customers or something like that.
yes, yeah, exactly. Some kind of smaller company. You're really making a difference. Like maybe I own and operate. I've kind of gone through that. I'm going through that process, so uh, I see how that works and that it's attainable, right? I mean, you can own and operate a company. I mean, it's very attainable. So maybe something like that in the clean energy space, or yeah, working for a startup. Uh, Definitely customer facing. Uh, Definitely kind of tackling a challenging subject. But as far as specifics, you know, I don't know. That's a great question.
Anyone's
I would
guess.
love to ask you the same question, but this is your podcast. So,
Hey, I can get on my soapbox. I mean, I'm in sales, so my perfect project is something where the customer keeps coming back for more. So like up front, you do a good job, you sell them something that they need. So for example, ours would be if there's a new building, it's supposed to be the smartest building ever, and they come to us and they say, help us make it smart, and I sell this upfront package to them. And then the building becomes smart. They're like, yes, they're singing our praises. Um, there's something about where if a customer goes through a bit of turmoil and then you turn it around for them, it's like a more sticky customer, a better customer. So if that was to happen, maybe that'd be perfect. Maybe I don't want any mistakes. But then after that, a company that builds one building typically builds more or holds like 20 or so. So I would want to say, oh, well, we made this building better. How do we make your other 20 better and have that long-term engagement? This
nice.
is also exactly what my boss has been telling me to get. So it's not like I came up this off the top of my head. Yeah, I mean that's pretty specific with my current job. I think general soft skills, perfect project is being in front of people, communicating complex topics, kind of to your point as well, and seeing a project all the way through. I think that with long sales cycles and long projects, I haven't really seen enough all the way through. For example, selling it, closing it, initiating it, implementing it, and then hearing from the customer after. So I'd like to do more of that. And you kind of mentioned that earlier too. If it's a 7-year sales cycle, get out of here. But not every project is perfect. So I'll take what I can get right now.
I like it. No, that time dimension, I think really is critical. I mean, the first thing that people look at when they take a job is, what's the salary? Maybe not the first thing, but the
Top three.
compensation, the money factor is, but knowing kind of how long things take. I mean, knowing what the sales cycles are, because I couldn't agree more. Like seeing a project through, like one, you get the experience, and you can bring that experience to your other customers. Say, hey, we went from A to Z here, and we saw all the challenges, and we addressed every single one throughout the process.
Doesn't happen every day.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Last two more. Do you have a mentor? If so, or if it's a group of people, what are they doing that you're not?
I currently do not, to my dismay. I think it's I think it's great to always have a mentor or be learning from someone. I mean, probably like at this point, the internet and Google and Spotify podcasts are my unofficial mentors.
There we go.
Just to get ideas and bounce ideas around. My previous bosses, I mean, I was fortunate. I had some really really great bosses that were pretty much like boss mentors. Um, so I learned a lot from those guys, and can still reach out to them today. Um, I mean, in terms of what they're doing that I'm not. I mean, my most recent boss, he was one of the fastest paced, hardest working guys I ever met. Um, and he could have a conversation with anyone. And I was always very, very impressed at how customer focused he was. No matter what, even when it pissed off half of our team, he would stand pretty true to that. So he got known. He kind of niched himself as, you know, Mr. Customer focused. And I know a lot of salespeople say that and they strive for that. He definitely took it to the next level.
Good for him. That's a good label to have. Cool. All right. Well, last thing, is there anything you want to promote? And to promote yourself, are you open to being a mentor for others?
Oh, absolutely. To the being open to be a mentor for others. I think it's huge. I mean, if I can help anybody out there, or if you have questions, I mean, please reach out. I've been reaching out to people, like I told you, with the job search, and I'm just eternally grateful for any kind of responses or conversations that I can have. So definitely down to pay it forward. Um, and in terms of plugging, nothing too much, but if anybody out there has any uh, high-end premier cosmetics or consumer goods needs for formulation or premier manufacturing services, come to VC Labs.
There we
We'll
go.
take care of you.
I'm sure your phones are going to be ringing off the hook after that one. VC Labs, always plug them. Well, Chris, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on the podcast. I've definitely got plenty of content here to share with the audience. So thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Eric. Adios.